I walked into St. Joseph's Cathedral in Beirut, Lebanon, with a loaded heart full of hatred, and grabbed the gold cross from the altar with my bare hands, determined to snap it in half and prove to the four men behind me that Jesus was nothing but a dead prophet invented by liars. But the instant my fingers closed around that cross, a force I cannot explain to this day shot through my body and dropped me to the marble floor in front of 300 witnesses who watched the Saudi prince fall to his knees and weep like a child. Have you ever been so certain about what you believed that you were willing to destroy something sacred to prove it? My name is Nasser Ibrahim Saud. I am 28 years old. And on December 14, 2019, I stormed into St. Joseph's Cathedral in downtown Beirut during an evening Christmas Mass with the sole intention of humiliating the Christian faith in front of hundreds of worshippers. I had no idea that everything I believed about God, about my family, about my identity, and about my future was about to be shattered in a way I could never undo. I was born in a gated compound in the Al Nasim district of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, into a family whose name carried weight in every room it entered. My father, Ibrahim Faisal Al Saud, was a distant member of the royal family and a senior advisor to the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. He oversaw the funding of mosques across 3 continents. My mother, Hessa, came from one of the wealthiest families in Jeddah. She wore the finest abayas money could buy, but her devotion was not for show. She led a women's Quran circle every Wednesday evening in our home, and the sound of her reciting Surah Maryam before dawn is one of the clearest memories of my childhood. My grandfather had personally funded the construction of 11 mosques across the kingdom. Islam was not something we practiced in our household. It was the air we breathed, the water we drank, the ground we walked on. While other boys in our compound played video games and raced expensive remote-control cars imported from London, I knelt on the carpet beside my father and memorized the Quran. By the time I was 14, I had completed the full memorization. My father wept at the ceremony. The imam who tested me told the gathering, "Allah has blessed this family with a special son. He will carry the faith forward for generations." I never missed a single prayer, not once. Not even during our family holidays in Switzerland, when there was no mosque nearby and I had to pray in hotel hallways. During Ramadan, I fasted without complaint and added extra voluntary fasts because I wanted Allah to know my heart was serious. My father was careful and deliberate about how he taught me to see Christians. He never screamed or used ugly words. He spoke calmly, which made his message even more powerful. He told me that Christians were deeply misguided people who had corrupted the message of the Prophet Isa and turned him into a false god. He said they committed shirk, the unforgivable sin, by worshipping a human being. He explained that their Bible had been rewritten so many times it contained almost nothing from the original revelation. By the time I was 16, I had joined a private youth study group organized by a scholar my father respected. The group met weekly to study arguments against Christianity, Hinduism, and atheism. I had no idea that the God those Christians worshipped was already watching me, already preparing the night that would tear my entire world apart. By 24, I held a master's degree in finance from King Fahd University. I was managing a portfolio of family investments worth more than most people could imagine. I was engaged to a beautiful woman named Reem bint Khalid, the daughter of a prominent businessman, a woman whose faith matched my own in every way. I had everything: wealth, a name that opened every door, a future wife, a family who loved me, the complete Muslim life, wrapped in gold. Ask yourself this question: have you ever built your entire life on something you were absolutely sure could never break? The trigger came during a business trip to Beirut in November 2019. I was meeting with Lebanese banking partners and staying at a hotel near the Hamra district. One evening, walking back from dinner, I passed a small Catholic church where the doors were open and I could hear singing inside. I do not know why I stopped. Something pulled at me. I stood on the sidewalk and listened for nearly 5 minutes. The music was unlike anything I had heard in a mosque. It was not a command. It was an invitation. The sound disturbed me deeply because it stirred something in my chest that I did not want stirred. I went back to my hotel, furious with myself. That night, I could not sleep. By morning, I had convinced myself that what I felt was a satanic trick, and that the only way to silence it was to confront the lie directly. I called 3 men I trusted from back home who happened to be in Beirut on their own business. Faris, a theology graduate, Walid, my cousin who had studied under the same scholar I had, and Tariq, a childhood friend who shared my convictions completely. I told him what had happened. I told him I wanted to walk into the biggest church in Beirut during their Christmas season and expose the fraud of Christianity in front of as many witnesses as possible. I had no idea that the Jesus I planned to humiliate was preparing to reveal himself in a way so powerful that my entire understanding of God would shatter in a single evening. We spent 2 weeks studying St. Joseph's Cathedral. We learned the Mass schedule. We mapped the layout. We identified where the altar sat, where the priest stood, where the gold cross was displayed. We chose the evening Christmas Mass on December 14th because it would be packed with hundreds of worshippers. Our plan was simple. Walk in dressed in Western suits so we would not draw attention. Wait until the priest raised the cross during the service. Then I would approach the altar, take the cross, and break it in front of everyone, while Faris read a prepared statement about the falsehood of Christianity. We rehearsed it twice in my hotel room. I felt no doubt whatsoever. I was a prince of Saudi Arabia. I had been trained in the truth of Islam since birth. I believed with complete certainty that Allah had placed this moment in my path for a reason. The night before, I rose at 2 in the morning and performed the Tahajjud prayer. I pressed my forehead to the hotel carpet and begged Allah for strength and courage. But as I prayed, a strange heaviness settled onto my chest. It felt like a hand pressing down from the inside. I dismissed it as nerves, perhaps Satan trying to weaken my resolve before a righteous act. I barely slept. I had no idea that what I felt pressing against me that night was not Satan at all. Everything I believed was about to be destroyed. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever been so convinced you were defending truth that you never once questioned whether your actions were actually righteous? We arrived at St. Joseph's Cathedral at 7:30 in the evening. The December air in Beirut was cool and damp. The cathedral stood tall against the darkening sky, its stone walls glowing warm from the light pouring through stained glass windows. People streamed through the heavy wooden doors, families with children, elderly couples holding hands, young women with scarves over their hair. We entered behind a group of teenagers. An elderly woman at the door smiled at us and whispered, "Welcome, Merry Christmas." She had no idea who we were or what we had come to do. Inside, the cathedral took my breath in a way I was not prepared for. Golden candlelight flickered across stone columns that stretched up to a vaulted ceiling painted with images of angels. The smell of incense and old wood and melting wax hung heavy in the air. An organ played softly somewhere above us. Hundreds of people sat in dark wooden pews, some praying silently with their eyes closed, some holding hands, some wiping tears. Children sat on their parents' laps. The atmosphere carried a peace so thick I could almost touch it. I had no idea that a church could feel like this. It reminded me uncomfortably of the most sacred moments I had ever experienced in a mosque. I pushed the feeling down. I told myself this was all decoration and deception. The priest began the service. He lifted the gold cross high above the altar, and the congregation bowed their heads. I gave Faris the signal. We stood. I walked down the center aisle with my heart pounding against my ribs. Faris followed, then Walid, then Tariq. People turned to look. Some smiled, thinking we were late arrivals. I reached the altar. I stepped past the railing. The priest looked at me with calm eyes and did not move. I grabbed the gold cross from his hands. The congregation gasped. A woman in the front row pulled her daughter close. An old man dropped to his knees and began praying. No one screamed. No one charged at us. No one cursed. The priest raised both hands gently and said in Arabic, "Brother, you are welcome in this house. Jesus loves you." He died for your sins, just as he died for mine. His peace made me furious. I wanted resistance. I wanted a fight. I wanted someone to give me a reason. Instead, they gave me silence and prayer. I gripped the cross tighter and raised it above my head, ready to bring it down against the stone floor and snap it in two. That is when it happened. The moment that changed everything I believed about God. The instant I lifted that cross above my head, heat exploded through my hands. Not pain, heat. A burning warmth that shot from my fingers up through my arms and into my chest like liquid fire. The cross began to glow. I am not speaking in metaphor. The gold metal radiated light that had no source. My hands locked. I could not release my grip. I could not move my arms. The warmth spread through my entire body and my knees buckled. I hit the marble floor hard. The cross fell from my frozen hands and landed upright on the stone without breaking, without even scratching. Then I saw him. Jesus was standing directly in front of me. Not in my imagination, not behind closed eyes, I was fully awake. He stood no more than 4 feet away between me and the altar. He wore white that seemed to carry its own light. His face held an expression I will spend the rest of my life trying to describe. It was not anger, it was not disappointment, it was love. A love so total, so undeserved, so specifically aimed at me that it broke something deep inside my chest. I felt every arrogant thing I had ever said about Christians, every cruel joke, every dismissive lecture, every moment I had looked down on people who followed this man. And he was looking at me without a trace of judgment, only tenderness, only mercy. He did not speak with a voice I heard through my ears. The words poured directly into my heart. I have loved you before you were born, Nasser. Why are you fighting me? I collapsed forward onto the marble, my face pressed against cold stone. I was crying harder than I had ever cried in my life. Tears poured from me in waves I could not control. Minutes could have been hours. I lost all sense of time and place. When I finally lifted my head, Faris was on his knees beside me, weeping into his hands. Walid was flat on the floor with his arms stretched out. Tariq had stumbled backward into a pew and was shaking, staring at the ceiling, whispering the Shahada over and over as if trying to hold on to something that was already gone. The congregation had gone completely silent. Then, one by one, they began to pray. For us. The people we had come to humiliate knelt and prayed for the men who had invaded their sacred space. The priest walked over to me. He knelt beside me on the marble. He placed his hand on my shoulder. His voice was gentle. He loves you, son. He has been waiting for you your whole life. Ask yourself this question. How do you explain meeting the living God face to face when everything you were ever taught told you he was dead and powerless? I knelt on that marble for a long time. When I finally looked up, my eyes were swollen and my hands were still trembling. I asked the priest one question. What do I do now? He smiled and said, you let him in. He led me in a prayer that I repeated through broken sobs. Jesus, I have been wrong about you my entire life. I have mocked your name. I have despised your people. I tried to break your cross, but I saw you tonight. I know you are real. I know you are who you say you are. Forgive me for everything I have done. Save me. I surrender my life to you completely. The cathedral erupted. 300 people who had watched us storm their church in hostility now rose to their feet, weeping, clapping, embracing each other, and then embracing us. Strangers wrapped their arms around me and called me brother. Faris surrendered his life to Christ that same night. Walid followed 2 weeks later. I was baptized in secret 3 months after, in a small apartment church in Amman, Jordan. The pastor gave me a new name, Paul, after the apostle who once persecuted the church and then spent his life building it. I chose it because I understood that man in a way most people never will. What happened next changed everything, and it cost me everything I had. Word reached my family within 6 weeks. I do not know who told them. Perhaps Tariq, who returned to Riyadh shaken but unconverted. perhaps a security contact who monitored my movements abroad.
That is when the cost began.
My father summoned me to our family compound. He sat behind his desk in his study, the same room where he had once wept with pride when I completed my Quran memorization. His face was a stone. His voice was cold, completely flat. He said 5 words that ended my old life forever. You are dead to us. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He said I had brought more shame on our family name than any enemy ever could. He told me I was no longer his son. He told me to leave the compound and never return. My mother did not come to say goodbye. She sent one message through a house servant, a folded piece of paper that read, "How could you do this to us?" I have not heard her voice since. Reem, my fiancé, did not even speak to me directly. Her father called mine. The engagement was dissolved within hours. I later heard she told her friends I had gone insane. My bank accounts were frozen. My company access was revoked. My phone was disconnected. Cousins I had grown up with, men I had shared meals and prayers and holidays with for 28 years, held a janazah prayer for me, a funeral for the living dead. I had no idea that following Jesus would strip away every single thing I thought made me who I was. Within 2 months, I had fled Saudi Arabia on a borrowed passport. I crossed into Jordan with 1 bag and the clothes on my body. I had gone from a prince with everything to a refugee with nothing. Ask yourself this question. Could you give up your name, your fortune, your family, and your country for someone you could not see but knew in your bones was real? But I gained everything that truly matters. I gained Jesus Christ. I gained a forgiveness that no amount of wealth or prayer or fasting had ever purchased. I gained a peace that does not rise and fall with my bank balance or my family's approval. I gained a church family in a man who took in a stranger and loved him as though he had always been their brother. I gained a purpose that has nothing to do with portfolios or prestige and everything to do with truth. Today I live in Amman, Jordan, with my wife, a Christian woman named Layla, whom I met at the church that first sheltered me. She looked at a man who had lost his title, his fortune, his family, and his country, and she chose to love him anyway. We were married in a small ceremony in that same church. The pastor who baptized me officiated. Faris and Walid stood beside me as groomsmen. Over 80 Muslims have given their lives to Jesus Christ after hearing my testimony. I work with a ministry that reaches people across the Gulf through encrypted channels and quiet gatherings in living rooms and hotel suites, speaking to men and women who are asking the same questions I once refused to ask. I still write letters to my parents twice a year. I write them by hand on plain paper. I tell them I love them. I tell them about Layla. I tell them about my son, who was born 7 months ago. I tell them about Jesus. No reply has ever come. I do not know whether my father reads those letters or burns them the moment he sees my handwriting, but I send them anyway, because love does not stop. My son's first sound was not the adhan. It was a hymn that Layla hummed softly while I held them both and cried with a gratitude that had no bottom. I had no idea that the worst night of my life in that cathedral would become the doorway to the only life worth living. Ask yourself this question. If God can reach a prince inside the most protected family in the most restricted country on earth, what makes you think he cannot reach you exactly where you are sitting right now? The Saudi prince who grabbed that cross and tried to break it no longer exists. In his place stands a follower of Jesus Christ who would die before he denied him. Look inside your own heart right now. If he can transform someone like me, someone who mocked his name, despised his people, and tried to destroy his cross with my own hands, then he can absolutely transform you, no matter what you have done or where you come from. The same Jesus who stood before me on that cathedral floor is standing before you right now through this very testimony. He is offering you the same love, the same forgiveness, the same complete transformation that changed everything for me. Jesus is calling you right now. Do not wait for a vision like the one I received. He is already pursuing you. He has been pursuing you since before you pressed play on this video. Will you let him in and discover the love that changes everything?